The storm rolled across the wild plains like a herd of angry spirits, thunder shaking the sky while cold rain stabbed the dusty land that hadn't seen mercy in months. Out on the lonely trail rode a man known across the frontier as Cowboy, a quiet cowboy with eyes that carried the weight of a past no one dared ask about. His horse pushed through the mud, every hoofbeat echoing in the empty night. Caleb had been riding for hours, trying to reach the small frontier town before the storm swallowed the road completely. Lightning cracked across the sky, turning the world white for a split second. And that's when he saw it. Something lying beside the broken stagecoach trail. At first he thought it was a torn blanket blowing in the wind, but the shape moved slightly. Caleb pulled the reins and his horse snorted nervously. Another bolt of lightning flashed, and this time the truth struck him harder than the thunder. It was a woman, alone, in the middle of the storm. Caleb jumped from the saddle and rushed toward her. The wind screamed as if trying to hide the truth of what had happened there. The stagecoach tracks nearby were deep in the mud, but there were also signs of struggle, boot marks, dragged dirt, and the remains of a broken trunk scattered across the ground. Bandits. Caleb had seen this kind of mess before. He knelt beside the woman carefully. She was soaked, trembling, her dress torn and covered in mud. Her face was pale but young, far too young to be left dying in the wilderness. In her hand she still clutched a small envelope, crumpled and wet from the rain. Caleb gently shook her shoulder. "Mom, can you hear me?" For a moment there was nothing but the roar of the storm. Then her eyes fluttered open slowly. Fear filled them instantly. The kind of fear that comes from losing everything in one terrible moment. She tried to sit up, but her strength failed. Caleb caught her before she collapsed again. "Easy now," he said quietly. "You're safe." But the word safe felt strange on his tongue because he knew the frontier rarely offered such promises. The woman whispered something weakly, her voice almost stolen by the wind. They took everything." Caleb looked toward the empty trail again. Whoever attacked that stagecoach was long gone. Outlaws didn't stay around after a job. They robbed, vanished, and left the broken pieces behind. Caleb carefully picked up the envelope from her hand and wiped the rain from it. The writing was barely visible, but one phrase stood out clearly: mail, order bride contract. His eyes narrowed. Suddenly the story made sense. She had come west searching for a new life, a husband. She had never met, hope for a future somewhere beyond the crowded eastern cities. Instead she had found bandits and a storm that nearly buried her alive. Caleb looked back down at her. She was barely conscious again, shivering violently. If he left her here, the cold would finish what the outlaws started. He didn't like getting involved in other people's troubles. A man survived longer on the frontier by minding his own business. But something about the way she held that letter, even while half unconscious, made him pause. That small piece of paper wasn't just a contract, it was the last thread of hope she had left. Caleb let out a slow breath, then stood up with quiet determination. He lifted her carefully into his arms and carried her toward his horse. The wind howled louder as if warning him that helping her would bring trouble. Maybe it would. But Caleb Ward had already made his choice. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and secured her gently in the saddle before climbing up behind her. "Hold on," he murmured, even though she might not hear him. Then, he turned the horse toward his ranch far beyond the hills. The storm swallowed them as they rode into the darkness. Caleb didn't know who the woman truly was, where she came from, or what kind of life she had left behind. All he knew was that fate had thrown her across his path on the worst night of the year. And sometimes, the frontier had a strange way of deciding who belonged in your story before you even realized it. But what Caleb didn't know yet was the truth hidden inside that soaked letter, a truth that would soon bring danger straight to his quiet ranch. So if you want to see what happens next, how this lone cowboy's life changes forever after rescuing the mysterious bride, make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay with this story, because the storm was only the beginning. Morning arrived slowly. Over the frontier, the storm finally retreating beyond the distant mountains while golden sunlight spilled across the endless fields. Caleb Ward stood outside his small ranch house, leaning against the wooden fence with a cup of black coffee warming his hands. The night had been long. After hours of riding through the rain, he had finally reached his ranch and carried the unconscious woman inside. He had lit the fireplace, dried her clothes as best he could, and wrapped her in blankets until the violent shivering stopped. Now the land looked peaceful again, as if nothing terrible had happened. But Caleb knew the frontier better than that. Peace rarely lasted long out here. Inside the cabin, the wooden floor creaked softly. Caleb turned his head just as the door opened slowly. The woman stepped out carefully, still weak but standing. Sunlight touched her face for the first time, revealing soft brown hair and tired eyes that carried the memory of fear. She looked around the quiet ranch, confused. "Where am I?" she asked softly. Caleb straightened and set his cup down. "My ranch," he replied calmly. "You were half frozen when I found you last night." For a moment she said nothing. Then the memory hit her like a bullet. Her breathing grew fast. The stagecoach. The men. Caleb nodded slowly. Bandits. Her shoulders dropped as if the word alone confirmed her worst nightmare. "They took everything," she whispered again. Staring at the ground, Caleb reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the wrinkled envelope he had kept safe overnight. "Not everything," he said quietly. She looked up quickly when she saw it. That small letter meant more to her than gold. She took it with shaking hands and held it close to her chest. "My name is Emily Carter," she said after a long silence. "I came from Boston." Caleb gave a small nod. Caleb Ward. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, two strangers brought together by pure accident. Finally Emily looked up again. "You saved my life." Caleb shrugged slightly. "Just happened to be riding that way." But Emily could see the truth behind his quiet words. Out here, no one risked trouble for strangers unless they had a reason. "I was supposed to meet my husband in Silver Creek," she continued slowly. "The man who answered my mail, order advertisement." Caleb frowned slightly. "You ever met him before?" "No," she admitted. "Only letters." The wind moved softly across the fields while Caleb thought about it. Silver Creek was a rough town, the kind where promises often meant nothing. "Do you still plan on going there?" he asked. Emily hesitated. For the first time she looked uncertain. The storm, the bandits, the loneliness of the frontier, it had shaken her dream badly. "I don't know," she whispered. Caleb studied her quietly. Something didn't sit right with him about the situation. Then a distant sound cut through the calm morning. Horses, multiple riders, fast. Caleb's eyes sharpened instantly. He stepped toward the edge of the porch and looked across the land. 3 riders appeared on the distant trail heading straight toward the ranch. Emily noticed the sudden tension in his face. "What is it?" Caleb's voice turned low and serious. "Trouble." The riders grew closer, dust rising behind them. Caleb recognized the kind of men who rode like that, outlaws who believed the world owed them something. Emily's heart started racing. "You think they're the same men?" Caleb didn't answer immediately, but deep down he already knew the truth. Bandits didn't leave loose ends, and someone must have seen him take Emily from the road. He turned toward her firmly. "Go inside." Locked the door. Fear flashed across her face. "But you." "Go," he repeated. She hesitated only a second before running back into the cabin. Caleb slowly stepped down from the porch and rested his hand near the revolver on his belt. The riders finally reached the ranch fence and stopped. Their leader smiled coldly. "Morning, Cowboy." The outlaw called out. "We're looking for something that belongs to us, a woman from last night." Caleb's eyes hardened like steel. The quiet ranch had suddenly become a battlefield. And for the first time in years, the lone cowboy realized that saving that abandoned bride might change his life forever. But the real fight was only beginning. If you want to see what happens next, whether Caleb can protect Emily and uncover the dangerous secret behind her mail-order marriage, make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay with this story, because the frontier still has many surprises waiting ahead.